Hi guys, how you doing?
Good
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Hello.
Okay, just a moment. Okay, let's give people a minute to join. We are, it's expected that we'll have more people today than we had last time. It's great to see you guys. Joseph, Shakil, Anatoly. Hey, Daniel, how you doing? Thank you for joining. We have a big agenda for today and some cool stuff. I hope you will not be disappointed by it. And all right, let's see.
Constantine, quick question.
Yeah,
From the last session, I have few questions, right? Should I email it to you or how should we do that? Regarding, whatever we learned and whatever the questions.
yeah, we can actually discuss them now if you'd like. Or if we see that they are taking too much time, we'll take that offline. But it's important that we have all this type of feedback
Okay.
because we are practitioners, right? And for that reason, we need to be able to discuss all these things
Okay.
during the meeting before we go into new content. So yeah, please go ahead and share.
Okay. The first question is, let's say I'm a startup with only
Mhm.
like 4 or 5 employees, right? Co-founder, founder, and financial, whatever, right? So do I still, or can I still get, sub-compliant, or the big four, when they come to do audit, they will tell me that, oh no, there's a segregation of duty, causes issue because you're only 4 people, you have, you know, there are like so many assets, and like how can all only 4 people take ownership of those assets?
Okay, so do I understand it correctly? Let me rephrase the question so I make sure I understand it correctly. So basically, what you're asking is what is that minimal size of the organization, right? That
Yeah.
will require some GRC, like overall, and at the same time, can the small company become compliant against a particular standard, right?
Yeah.
Or get a compliance certification against a particular standard.
Right.
Yeah. So the answer to this is there is no limit. There is no floor to it. So you can be a one-person company and still pursue the compliance certification. What you can be one-person company and still think about governance, risk, and compliance inside your org, if you will, right? So there is no limit on that, and it's completely normal, especially in this world of one person startups that AI is throwing us into. That maybe one person company will also get compliance certificates when they need so, and the rest will be the AI agents that they operate.
I see. So now, what if my all my assets and all my services are hosted on in cloud? So let's say if I go out and try to sell my business, right?
Mhm.
I don't have a SOC, but can I just provide, let's say, my cloud provider SOC, and would that be sufficient enough? Because I don't have anything on-prem, everything is on in the cloud, and I don't maintain the cloud. The cloud vendors that do. So I, I don't. There's nothing for me to get sub-compliant of, right? Or maybe I didn't understand the sub-compliance clearly.
Oh yeah, yeah. There is, of course, a base or a found, a requirement for compliance. There are certain assets that need require the certification. Okay, so again, to make sure that I understand your question correctly, you're saying you have your applications in the cloud, right? Your software,
Yes. Yes.
and you outsource everything or delegate everything to third parties, correct? and they manage it
Yes.
for you.
Yes.
And for that reason, there is nothing to certify, right? But it's not true, because as a company, as we discussed last time, um, everything you own or manage or operate is your operational asset, including your engagements with your third parties. So if your software is completely developed by a third party, it is hosted and managed by a third party, and your whole company is operated, like all your accounting, legal, and everything is all third parties, then there is still your software, right, that you own and operate, and there are those relationships or contracts with all those vendors that you operate, so they become your operational assets, and you need to ensure their compliance and showcase it to your auditor in order to get a compliance certification. And but most importantly, you still own a software or a product or a service that you offer, right? You mentioned you're hosting something in the cloud. I believe
Yes.
it's your software that you're selling to your customers. So this is
Yes.
your main ground for compliance certification. You have to certify this information system or this software, and everything around it, um, and still get this, compliance certificate for that. So you cannot say that if you're delegating everything or outsourcing everything, that you don't have anything. Your company is still uh, um, exists, right? It still has operational assets. It owns something. It manages something. So basically, you have to certify on all that.
I see. Okay. And one last question. You mentioned about ownership of assets, right? The thing is, let me say I joined as a GRC analyst, right? And let's say I have a
Mhm.
big meeting with the people, existing people, and I ask them that, you know what, can you give me a list of all the assets that the company has, right? And then later I find out that who are the, and nobody claims ownership of this asset, right? So how do
Mhm.
I go about getting people to, let's say, own those asset areas, their areas? How can as a GRC analyst, I'm new to the company, I cannot, um, in how do I say it, impose people on a duty that, okay, you're going to be ownership of this, you're going to be ownership of this. How do I go about doing that? Um, because
Yes.
nobody wants to
Um,
take ownership of asset. Just
yes. It's a very, very, very good question, and it's a very realistic situation in multiple companies, especially on the smaller end. People tend to do two things. First, they try to not think about some real risks that they're facing, right? And the other problem is the one that you mentioned. They don't want to take ownership on the assets. So in this case, it depends on how much influence you have, or how much of personal mm, charisma, if you will, you have, right, to make friends with those people and to get them on your side. It will not happen instantly and immediately, right? The way I do it with my customers is I say, okay, if there is no one to take ownership on the asset, I will take it. And then I'll start. I I'm not going around people who are actually accountable for those assets, but instead I start um, working with them together on uncovering the actual risks and explaining to them trying to communicate to them the necessity of implementing certain controls on those assets that will protect them, right? And as soon as I establish the first layer of governance over those assets, they are more interested and more easy on taking ownership of them back from me because it is no longer an unknown or uncertainty for them. So because the people don't want to take ownership on the assets, for the first major reason is because they don't know how to properly maintain it, how to properly be accountable for them, right?
Right.
And what does it actually mean? So if you can explain it to them through, friendly conversations and maybe some examples, there's this saying, lead by example or something, right? And you could quickly get them on your side, and actually they will be more interested in taking ownership on the thing because of two things: because they now know what it looks like to own that asset, right? They understand how to manage it properly, and they always know that they can rely on you for an additional help if they are not really certain about what to do with the asset in certain situations. So this would be the way to go, but of course it depends heavily on how much influence you have over the organization. What's your position in the organization? But what I know, what I learned throughout my life about people is that when you show um, willingness, and when you show a certain amount of energy, and it's a positive energy that you are directing onto a particular situation or a person or an asset, people will be more likely to support you in that mm, effort, or rather than block you with that. Of course, there are companies with some, with a complicated uh, relationship structure. We can call them toxic environments and things like that. It's much harder to get through those. But overall, my suggestion would be what I just told you. To try to take ownership, show them by example how easy it is to actually manage the asset. That there is nothing to fear about it, and they could take it from you.
Got it. Thank you. And one last question. How do I ensure that all the assets have been discovered? I mean, let's say, is it through a tool? What if the company doesn't have a tool? And let's say if somebody just go around behind my back and then add an asset without letting me know at one point, or
Ah, yeah. So our work as GRC specialists is a continuous asset discovery, and there is no doubt that somebody will create an asset, or let's call it form an asset, establish an asset, and will never let you know. There is not only a big chance of that; it's inevitable. It actually happens all the time. So um, we actually I had a lot of interesting or fruitful conversations with my GRC peers, and we were discussing what would be the best way to organize the asset discovery within a company, and we came up to the conclusion that it would be great if every department in the organization would dedicate or assign at least one person to GRC role, in addition to the role that they're already playing, or inside the organization. Like, let's say they're a financial analyst, they work in a finance department, but their manager can assign them to the GRC role, so they actually start cooperating with the GRC department, with the GRC arm of the company, right? And through that communication, we can ask them to uh, to tell us about all those assets that this department is, establishing or creating or operating. Um, and we try to develop a culture where people are proactively reporting on all new assets that are appearing, so we can put them in the asset inventory, figure out the asset owners and start managing them properly.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Do they have any additional questions?
Now, can I ask you something?
Yeah, sure.
So like Shaq asked earlier about the having a company fully on cloud, right? So if I just want to make sure I understood it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you have a software as a service that's completely on cloud, you would have to make sure that the software is compliant and the way the clients access the software is compliant, and
Mm-hmm.
like the way the developers work on that cloud software is compliant, things like that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's all those things that you just mentioned. So that the developers are developing software in a secure manner, that they are publishing it in a controlled and secure manner, and then that it is published into a secure environment in the cloud, right? So basically, the cloud infrastructure should also be secure, and that it is operated in a compliant manner and secure manner, which means that the proper levels of monitoring is established, and the proper levels of alerting are established, and that the incident response procedures are in place. So when there is an operational incident, it's being handled correctly. Or, for instance, the system outage, the system goes down, somebody needs to recover it, right? Then the disaster recovery procedures, like restoring from a yesterday's data backup or something. And if there is a security incident, it's also properly handled through this same incident response procedure. So everything that you listed is a correct understanding, and this is actually the reason why we cannot say that even if we outsource everything, we cannot say that there is nothing to certify. There is, if you outsource everything, it just shifts into the third party management category, and you still have to certify all that.
And the all the things like that we have to get compliant, like the gaps that we have to fill, it depends on the framework we're trying to get compliant, right? Like
Yes.
GDPR or something.
So yes and no. First of all, GRC as a discipline has to be established inside the organization based on principles, right? Um, and this is the first thing you do. So when we work in GRC, yes, there may be a goal to get a certified on a particular standard. Let's say ISO 27001, right? But mainly, we should act based on the GRC principles first, because they are fully aligned. All those frameworks, the standards that we want to achieve compliance on, they're actually fully aligned with GRC principles. But please do not. Let me just ask you to avoid the situations when you start looking at a standard as a goal and put it in front of you as the source for your activities. Your activities should be based on the GRC principles mainly, and on the discipline first of all, right? And this compliance framework is just a list of checks, a checklist that you will be verifying yourself against, right? Your organization against, and then the auditor will test you against those controls. But your actual GRC implementation may be much wider and broader and more mature, hopefully, or less mature. It depends on how how it's done, right? But the thing is, many companies, many organizations, they start with a particular standard. They say, "Oh, we need to be SOC 2 compliant," and they take the text of the regulation, the standard, they read it, they get a playbook somewhere, and they say, "Okay, we will implement all these things that are listed here." But in fact, they are not establishing the proper governance over, around their own operational assets. And as we here in our on our GRC learning sessions are reviewing GRC as a discipline, I must say that the first thing you need to look at, and you should always act based on GRC principles, and everything else will follow. Okay, is that
Yeah.
helpful?
So instead of having a framework as a goal, I should have some general GRC principles as the base.
Yes. And this is actually the goal of these sessions, for us to understand what are those GRC principles, what are those different areas, how they look like, what should go in them, how do we establish all this governance and risk management, so that we can ensure compliance with all those particular, regulatory standards, right?
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Do we have any more questions? And Shika, I saw you joined. Welcome to the session.
Thank you.
If we don't have any additional questions now, we can just get into the topic of this session itself, right?
Yeah.
And I will share my screen real quick, and we'll just go from there. So in this session, we use SOC 2 as an example, like overall, right? We continue learning GRC principles, but we are using SOC 2 as an example of how the company establishes the governance, risk, and compliance, and then ensures compliance against a particular compliance standard, like SOC 2, right? As we have discussed in the previous sessions, GRC has two worlds. It's actually three, but I tend to think of two. These worlds are absolutely ephemeral. It's not something that you necessarily will read in whatever books or papers or on the other training sessions on GRC. This is how I view the GRC world. So it is built of the administrative policies and procedures or principles, right, of governance, and then technology policies and procedures or principles of governance. So there is another track which is physical, but and it relates to like buildings, facilities, office locations, things like that, like IT devices, removable media, whatever you can think physical, like transport and manufacturing, stuff like that, right? But I tend to kind of still lean towards this separation on two tracks, administrative and technology, because mainly we understand that in present tense, more of the majority of the companies are technology companies, so they definitely have this technical part, technology part, and everything else is administrative, including facility management and manufacturing management stuff, although it is a big third, how you say it, like third world that is shaping up, that we will probably have to discuss separately going forward. But for now, it's not, for our current conversations, it's not so important until we get there. Okay. And as we learn GRC, my goal is to practically show you how we can run both tracks, administrative and technology, together, right? And in parallel. And it is definitely a lot of work, but I don't want us to stay on either side, because as I mentioned on the previous sessions, I see many companies that have actually leaned towards a particular track this much that they became, a shops specializing on only administrative controls, for instance, or only on the technological GRC and compliance, right, on risk management and compliance. The worlds are very big, and we as GRC experts, we can specialize in either of those in a small domain within each of those tracks. But if we want to become really good GRC specialists, we need to still have this high level picture in our minds and understand both worlds, even though we specialize in a particular track or even a very small part of it, right? So the parallel tracks model here is administrative controls, technical controls. Administrative is everything that is policy, process, or documented procedure. Technical is the actual implementation, system configuration, system settings, cloud security configuration, cloud infrastructure configuration, on-prem server infrastructure, whatever you can imagine, right? And in order for us to work on two tracks in parallel, in the last session, we introduced our imaginary company, Orbis, right? That has, actually, I found that it has like 80 people. And it is building the human resource benefit management software and selling it to their customers, right? And we will be actually working with many of people from this company who could help us to improve the administrative processes as well as improve the technology piece of governance and compliance. And today we will make small baby steps on both tracks. On the administrative, we will review the 17 starter policies that actually are SOC 2 compliant, if you will. So if the SOC 2 auditor will, if you invite the SOC 2 auditor, they will see all those policies. They will say that it's a sufficient number. And as we dig deeper into the list, the auditor will actually accept that list of policies and will find it sufficient for SOC 2 compliance. And from the technology perspective, we will dig into the IT management, the IT admin stuff, because we have 80 people in Orbis, and they are being issued the company laptops, and there should be the IT department working on those and securing them, right? So the goal of our meeting today is to actually review policies from the administrative side and some IT best practices from the technology side, right? And talk more about how we establish all that, how we establish visibility across all that from the GRC perspective, right? And how we are, as GRC experts, can manage things here and there, either all together or separately. And before we start, please advise if you have any questions on the goals of this session.
No, it's fine.
Great. Okay, so before we get into the list of policies, I mentioned to you that I am a practitioner. I'm a hands-on GRC guy, right? So I would like to entertain. Go ahead. Sorry. Oh, hey, Shakil. Yeah, I believe it was some background
I
noise
apologize.
from your end. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So I'm a hands-on guy, and I want to entertain you with some things that I build that help me manage GRC, right, that go into my methodology. And please give me one small moment. I will share with you a screen of the asset management part that I've built. Just a moment. Come on. Sorry, I need to find it. Just a moment. Give me 1 sec. Let's see if we can open it here. Yeah, all right. So I'm sharing right now. So I mentioned to you last time that our main goal is to look at the companies from the GRC perspective, right? Through its operational assets, correct? If we take a position at in GRC and we want to govern and manage risks for the whole organization, right? We need to know what assets it operates, and basically we need a good outlook at all those assets. And I showed you last time the asset tree that I built, right? And basically my goal was to identify not all, but the majority of possible categories of operational assets that the company can manage. Of course, this list will never be comprehensive because of so many things showing up here and there, and I'm not an expert at everything. But today I want to introduce the asset manager to you that actually enlists all the operational assets that our Orbis, the company that we are trying to manage and manage the risks for, right? All of their assets are listed here. For instance, if you look at this list, we start with the Orbis, or the organization itself, right? We have asset owner Rachel Torres. I believe she is a CEO. We will look at the org chart in a moment. And then all other assets, like for instance, vendors that the company works with, they have Orbis as a parent asset. So this is how the asset relationship actually is organized, right? And for each asset, we have a parent, we have the owner, and of course, all this data was extracted from the company description, the company profile that we created last time. And this is a full list of assets that we have discovered so far, right? Some of them still need to be broken into individual items, like executive mobile devices. It says 5 units here. It has to be each device as a separate asset record, right? But what's important about these assets here is that, as I mentioned last time, how do you ensure compliance of the organization against a particular standard? If you're looking at everything through the operational assets perspective, then it means that every asset that you have in your list, you need to apply certain security, administrative, whatever controls to it to ensure its compliance, right? And the goal of GRC expert is to identify what actual controls apply to each asset, right? And how we can implement them within the organization, who we need to work with to implement them within the organization, right? And let me show you an example. of how those controls may look like, right? For instance, we have the asset of type vendor. The company is developing code, so it uses GitHub. I hope you guys know what GitHub is, as their source code repository. So they have a GitHub account, and for that reason, GitHub is recognized as their vendor, right? And these are the controls that are mainly applied to every vendor, right? That actually you work with inside your organization. It's not a comprehensive list of controls. We will go to get to that later, but it's just a starter list of controls. So for instance, we need to perform vendor risk level assignment based on established criteria. So we need to establish the criteria for calculating vendor risk, like GitHub. Is it a high risk vendor for Orbis, or a medium risk vendor for Orbis, or a low risk vendor for Orbis? We don't know, right? But we need to establish that scoring, if you will, right? And then we need to identify and label each vendor according to their risk level. And we will get into that far later in our sessions, but I just wanted to show you that what all this basically means is that if this list contains a comprehensive list of all operational assets of the company, all of them, and we did a great job at discovering all of them, presumably, then as we open each of these assets and go through the list of controls that are required to be established on each asset, right? And we work with all those people within the organization to establish those controls. So, and somehow there's an indicator that this control has been established and everything is fine. And we implement some sort of monitoring, which is the risk management part, right? Over those controls. That we could, at every point in time, we could say, yes, this control is not only established, but it's also well maintained. So there is monitoring behind it. So we know that at every point in time, this control is in a good shape or in a good state. As we go through all controls, we ensure all controls are implemented and established, and let's call them are well maintained, or green, right? They show green light. And it happens on all assets in the organization. This actually will mean that the organization is fully compliant with whatever GRC program that we have established. Correct? Is it clear, or do you need an additional explanation
clear.
over that?
Clear.
Fantastic. And this is actually, I suggest that you take this point of view when you join the organization. You should always be pursuing a complete visibility across its all operational assets in order to ensure compliance, because otherwise things will fall apart. There are so many terms like shadow IT, shadow AI, shadow everything, which means basically that those assets are being used without the company knowing about it. And there may be data breaches, there may be information leaks, and whatever other things happening within the organization, right? That the company doesn't know about, and nobody cares about, and it puts the company at a big reputational risk. All right, so I will be getting back to this view all the time. Let's quickly look at our company's org chart so we can see how many people we're working with, and we'll get right into policies. Let me find the org chart and share it with you right now. Okay, just a moment. Mhm. Let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
What are those important things about Orbis? It's a fully remote company. They don't have any office locations. But this will actually, I want to change that because for our example, it's not a very good way of of looking at things. We want at least one or maybe two office locations so we can actually review the physical controls as well. But for today, this is actually Orbis, and it was only presented on the presentation deck last time. Today we can look at it as the from the organizational chart perspective, and it becomes much more visual. Now we understand why Rachel Torres, for instance, is the person accountable for Orbis as a whole organization, right? For that asset in our asset management system. We can see that Marcus will be responsible for all the technology pieces, except maybe IT, which is device management, right? That Sarah is responsible for everything related to finance and legal. Daniel is for product development, Brett for sales, Olivia for marketing, right? And so on and so on. Diana for the customer relationship, and Vanessa for HR. And as we review policies right now, you will see that they actually fall under a few categories. There are policies related to HR operations, policies related to the operational governance of the whole company overall, policies related to IT and device management, policies related to legal ops, and of course to the product development, software development, and infrastructure, either cloud or on-prem, and so on, right? And this is one practical piece. You need to have the asset management system or something, the inventory, right? The other practical piece, you need to have the org chart. And next time, hopefully, I will be on time with that. We can review all those departments and job roles and job descriptions. I mean, it all rolls up into practical things that you, as a GRC expert, you should have as tools and or papers or documents, right? When you work inside the organization, if you don't have tools that can support you on your journey, you are most likely to fail. So it's your first responsibility to go back to your management and say, hey, as a GRC expert, I understand it well that we need this and that, like the org chart, the asset inventory, and some compliance management system if you want to comply with a particular standard, right? And just having that type of a system is also good overall if you want to establish governance, because it gives you some guides, some guidelines on how to, what exactly, what are those small pieces that you need to implement so you can work directly with people inside the company to do that. So I'm just trying to show you all those practical pieces, and please feel free to request those from me after or in between our sessions. Whatever I have as document templates, whatever I have as examples, I would be happy to share with you. If I publish the asset management system somewhere on the internet, I'll definitely be happy to give you access to it so you can play with it. And it will be multi-tenant, so you can create your own imaginary organization and populate all those people there and assets and play with it and experiment with it and see how much effort goes into compliance. But I'll stop here and switch back to the policy list because we are definitely need to focus on that a little bit. And again, starting this session, I want you to understand we will be switching subjects frequently. And if it's something that is not very convenient for you, or you feel like I should go slower, please do not hesitate to let me know, okay? The reason I'm switching contexts or subjects is because as a GRC expert, this is your main job, to switch contexts, unless you are tasked to do certain particular things, right? But while we are running the whole GRC program for a whole big organization, we have to switch contexts quite frequently. So 17 policies, and again, the list of policies that I will present to you here is just a list of the starter policies. Every organization has its own policies, and policies, as I mentioned once in my previous conversations with my GRC peers, policy is a contract between the company and its employees, between the company, between its the company and its customers, the company and its peers, third parties, and everyone, right? It's actually I call it a constitution of a company, a set of rules that people have to follow or agree to follow, not have, but agree to follow. And if somebody does not agree with whatever policy statements, they have the right to object. They have the right to request the revision, right? And it is important for the organization to respond to those things. And whenever the employee or a third party or a customer feels that they do not agree with the company policies, most likely they should part ways unless this situation can be somehow resolved, right? Because we all operate under our own rules. Every company has its own structure. It actually is structure defining stuff. So the policies define the company structure in a way, right? And if people or some other entities are like organizations are incompatible with those policies, probably they should not be doing business together, right? And again, policies, I in my mind, I kind of split them into break them into a few categories. There are the organization level policies that are related to the whole org. It's mainly operational principles and some commitments that the company gives to itself. The code of conduct also goes into that list. The and a few other, like operations security, business continuity, and disaster recovery plan. All those guys fall under the organizational policies category. Then there are policies related to HR and working with personnel inside the company. And these are first of all, the HR security, and then the acceptable use policy, of course. What else can go into this category? I'll give you the breakdown. Then there are IT management policies, which are just a moment. IT management is where it goes, actually. Removable media. Okay, as the asset management. Yeah, sorry about that. It mainly goes into the asset management here, but it could actually be extracted into its own IT management policy. And and every organization manages it their own way. Um, I will give you a breakdown next time. Here, let's just go through this list quickly and see what each policy is about. And maybe you could tell me by the next time we meet, or ask me this question in between. Tell me what you see maybe missing from this list, right? Because it is actually only one-sided. It only relates to what may be required by SOC 2, but it is not necessarily a full coverage of policies for your typical technology company, especially in the world of the world is changing, right, because of the AI shift. And I would like that you identify the gaps here and tell me about those gaps so we can quickly address those. So the information security policy here is the master governing document. It actually contains references to the other policies, so it's quite easy. Information security roles and responsibilities. It rolls back to the org chart, right? But it is specifically a policy that is specifically designed to enlist all information security roles. As we know, Orbis, our imaginary organization, is missing some quite important security roles, so we'll need to find ways to fill those gaps. Acceptable use policy is rules for everyone to use company-owned assets, technology mainly, but also the facilities and other stuff. Access control policy are the general rules about how systems and facility access and device access is provisioned, modified, and revoked. Asset management policy covers all the assets in the organization and tells the rules about how the assets are being managed. For instance, the asset owner needs to be assigned to the asset, right? And the asset has to be compliant with particular regulations or internal rules. Risk management policy is the overall policy about how it's actually how GRC program works, right? How we identify business risks, technology risks, customer-related risks, legal risks, and all other risks. How we maintain lists of those risks. How do we build, plans to address those risks and decrease their severity and things like that. We'll talk about it in more details in the other sessions. Data management policy is an important piece here. How we classify data, how we label it, especially in the world of AI and AI developments, it's important to know that the data lineage, the data, everything, data should be, the company should know what data it operates, should label it properly, so it should assign the risk levels to data as well, because some data is sensitive, some is public, and things like that. Cryptography policy is about what encryption algorithms are being used within the company to encrypt data and to decrypt it, of course. Yeah. HR security is about how personnel security is being established and managed. How do we conduct hiring? What goes into the role change? How do we communicate, in the particular situations when we need to let people go, and things like that, right? What people, and we'll talk more about onboarding, offboarding, role change procedures later. Code of conduct is the main behavioral and ethical requirements document for all personnel in the company. I would say that the main constitutional statements go into that document, right? So with which people agree or disagree, and this kind of the first thing they see and should see in the company. And from my perspective, code of conduct should be a public document, but in many cases it isn't, because it actually communicates back to the customers and the other parties what are the biggest values, internal values, and mission of the company, so people know who they're working with, right? Secure development policy is about how software development practices are being established, how secure they are. It actually relates to how software is designed in a secure way, scanned for security vulnerabilities, patched, how it's securely published, and so on and so forth. Operations security is about organizational and technology change management, backups, monitoring, not necessarily only technology piece. You need monitoring or surveillance in your office locations, right? I just want to make sure we understand that it's multidimensional. That monitoring needs to be established over many of company processes, like how finances go in and out and things like that, right? Incident response plan, we touched that. It's all about how we react to incidents and do we have any particular procedures and protocols to handle them properly. Business continuity and disaster recovery, the policy that actually explains how, in the very bad circumstances, it could be even a war, but in less extreme cases, it's a flooding in the area or power outages or whatever, how the company still ensures its own business continuity, how we continue to operate in the disastrous or very complicated circumstances. Third-party management is all about how we manage relationship with third parties, and it's not only vendors; it's also our customers and whoever else we consider to be a third party. It could be software vendors like, for instance, GitHub, Google, whatever we use, like OpenAI, Anthropic, whatever we use inside the organization, they all fall under this third-party category. Physical security is how we establish the physical security controls on our office locations and also devices and also removable media and also, the physical surrounding. I would call it physical and environmental protection policy in many ways. And removable media policy is about how we manage, how we stand to the use of removable devices in our company, like overall, and how we manage safe use of removable media, because removable media is a big risk for the company. If the data is lost in transport, like a flash drive or something, it could be leveraged by whoever wants to use it, and there is a chance that of a data breach, right? The data may be leaked, and it could cause a reputational damage for the company. So there are some policies missing, especially because of the AI stuff, right? And I would ask you to maybe come back to me and say, hey, these policies, I think, should also be here. And I will send you in the email this presentation that I've built for today. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to touch the device management piece, but I'm at least happy that I entertained you with the asset management part and the other things that we have discussed. We'll start next session exactly from the device management perspective, from the IT part, and go with that. But for now, I think this is all I wanted to, or I had time to communicate. Do you guys have any immediate questions that I can answer for you? All
I
right.
want to ask something about the asset management thing you showed. Is that something you made yourself?
Yes. Yeah, I built that based on my own knowledge and understanding. Yes, but I'm happy to share it with you.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful because it gave a good overview of the asset thing. So when you explained it, I didn't actually understand it as well as when you showed it, right? So
Yeah,
that was really helpful.
we have to be visual with things. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely do that. And I do really appreciate you joining today and listening and asking you questions. Shaquille, thank you very much. And we may start every new session with opening questions. So please bring them to the next session. And I have to run for another meeting, but I hope I will see you guys next Friday. And let's keep talking in between in Reddit group that we have, and through the other channels. You have my email address, and I gave you my Telegram handle. So let's be in touch, okay, guys?
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
And I appreciate you very much. Have a good weekend, everyone, and see you soon. See you next Friday. Thank you. Bye bye.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Have a
much.
good day.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.